Hello, everyone. Welcome to AI and Market Research, the next chapter. I'm Ben Cortez, and I'll be leading today's session with my colleagues Dave Ollett, Allison Owens, and Keaton Wilson. Before we dive in, just a few housekeeping items. All of you are in view and listen-only mode, but we'll have Q&A at the end of the session. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Also, please ensure your Zoom name reflects your full name and the company you're with, so we can address your questions properly. For those of you that joined our previous session, AI and Market Research, thanks. This is an extension of that discussion, focusing on growth, innovation, and new use cases of AI in our industry over the past year. The format's going to be similar this time around, with an informal roundtable, and then we'll transition into Q&A to address all of your questions. We're going to go ahead and start with introductions before we kick off the conversation. Dave, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Happy to be here. I'm David Willett. I'm a director here at KS&R on the healthcare team. And we've been spending the better part of the last year exploring ways to leverage AI both internally and externally with our clients. So happy to share some of what we've been doing.
Great. Thanks, Dave. What about you, Allison?
Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Owens. I am a senior experience designer and Ariba trained moderator with about 11 years in qualitative research. So here at KS&R, I really lead our AI and qualitative initiative. So that means I focus on testing and piloting tools to see where they add value and where human expertise remains irreplaceable. So my perspective today is just about balancing innovation with rigor so we can deliver insights that are faster and deeper without compromising quality. So I'm excited to share that with you all. Thanks.
Great to have you, Allison. Keaton, you're next.
Yeah, I'm Keaton Wilson. I work on the Decision Sciences and Innovation team, and I'm a solutions developer on that team. And I work on a lot of the actual development and building of the tools, both AI and not AI, that we use at KS&R behind the scenes. Excited to chat about AI today.
Thanks, Keaton. And I'm Ben Cortez, VP of Decision Sciences and Innovation, which is our end-to-end quantitative research arm. I lead all things quantitative when it comes to consulting, design, experimentation, innovation, and thinking about all of the methods that help us get the insights that we provide to our clients today. And one part of that is AI. I've been leading our Amplify initiative, which covers all things AI at KS&R. Since we started a couple years ago, and am really excited to share all the innovations and changes that have been happening over the last 12 months, bringing everybody up to speed and connecting the dots from our previous session to today. And so let's kick off the conversation with where we've seen Gen AI and LLMs, or large language models, really thrive, which is in unstructured data and the qualitative space. So Allison, I think that you're a great person to share some of your insights about how you've been leveraging AI in your day-to-day, given that's been really the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to applying AI in our industry.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. So we have been working to kind of pilot and test an AI qualitative research companion. So when I say that, I mean really a supportive partner in the qualitative process, but in no means is it a replacement for human expertise. So we've been piloting and testing tools that help kind of from the very start of projects. And as we've been exploring, we do this because not every tool is built for qualitative research. And we want to be confident in the inputs that are grounded in our project data, that minimize hallucinations or irrelevant content. So we want to make sure that they align with the way that we actually work. So the tool we've landed with after some rigorous testing helps us as soon as discussions are underway. So it helps us process recordings, it helps us generate transcripts, pull early verbatims, and begin structuring conversations into themes that help us kind of start to think through and develop our storylines. We found that the real value here is that it speeds up reporting and it gives people who aren't in the room or the people that are not moderators a way to quickly understand what the participants are saying without having to read through every transcript or listen to every group, which we know can be time consuming, especially for these larger research projects. So we found that, it's important that we find tools that don't write the insights for us. So we're not losing the voice and the interpretation. The so what is still very much done by our researchers here at KS&R. Our AI companion is just there to handle the repetitive or structural work. So our teams can really focus on creating stronger implications and recommendations.
That's great, Allison. You mentioned something that I think we should dive into a little bit more, which is hallucinations. right?
Sure,
And so
yeah.
how is this particular tool that we're using today helpful or different from some of the off-the-shelf tools that we've tried in the past?
We found that the kind of off-the-shelf tools or the earlier tools, they're pretty limited for qualitative research. We found that they leaned heavily on generic training data and sometimes produced things that just weren't accurate or really grounded in the discussions we were having, or what you may have heard us refer to as hallucinations, right? So that made these tools really hard to trust for us, and that is not something that we wanted to back at all. So what's different now is we've done the work to test and identify solutions that really stay grounded in our data. So we base the queries on our discussion guides, our project objectives, and verbatim responses from participants, right? So the recordings, the transcripts, it's not based at all in random or related web content. So by doing that, we've been able to reduce those risks and make the outputs more reliable. And ultimately, that's given us, speed, right? So we can move faster from raw transcripts to a more organized and digestible starting point. The structure really helps us see patterns, spot the most meaningful quotes, and get to the heart of the story quicker. I'd say the speed is a win, but the bigger gain is actually quality. Ultimately, it really frees up time for us researchers to dig deeper into the why and develop sharper implications and recommendations for our clients.
No, that's great. I can't imagine there being anything more frustrating than, looking for a quote, let's say, that an AI solution provides for you, and you find out, oh, no one ever actually said that, and then having to pivot and figure out what else you're going to do from there. So that's really helpful. And another thing that I think was really interesting was mentioning about having a blend of moderators or multiple team members, especially on large qualitative products or projects. So can you talk a little bit more about how these tools help consolidate that learning in a more efficient way?
Yeah, absolutely. So with this tool, we are able to chunk the transcripts. So regardless of how many moderators are on something, it kind of summarizes everything in one space for us. And we get to allow this tool for all of our moderators, all of the analysis team that is on this. It really helps summarize themes, but organize them as well to get people up to speed quicker than we are if they were to read the transcripts or listen in to the conversations live.
It sounds like a huge time saver.
Absolutely.
So I think opening up to the broader group, Dave, how have you leveraged Gen AI for Qual? Have you used these similar tools, or are you doing other things?
Yeah, I mean, we've been leveraging similar tools internally, right? But obviously, one of the natural extensions is how can then we then extend it to our clients, right? And having external facing tools that are leveraging similar technology, right? So it's not just to help ourselves, but it's also to help our clients. So one of the questions that we've been asking ourselves is how can we extend the value of the research that we're giving our clients, right? And in particular, as we're talking about qualitative, some of the things that Allison mentioned also apply to how we might have client-facing tools as well. So ultimately, one of the things that we've done recently is custom chatbots for our clients, right? And one of the things that KS&R always does, even in any qualitative engagement, right, is we're giving our clients audio recordings. We're giving them the transcripts, right? We're giving them a summary, right? But to Allison's point, if you have a large qualitative projects, our clients are busy with other things. They need a more efficient way to even interact with their own research, right? And so a custom chatbot definitely allows for them to do that in sort of a more engaging way. I mean, we're already doing this in the quantitative world, right? If you think about like conjoint analysis and market simulators and online dashboards, right? Those are already things in place on that side of our industry that have been around for a while. And it's just now, right, that we're starting to see these similar types of tools to engage with qualitative research, which is very exciting. And I guess the one thing that I should say is that as we thought about these solutions and these custom chatbots, first and foremost, security was at the forefront of everything, right? Like we don't want to be putting our clients' data out there into these public tools, right? And so being able to have a self-contained chatbot, I think creates trust with our client that their data is being contained, it's not being used for anything else, right? Which is important to us, right? We want to make sure that, that information is just not getting out there. But we've also found that it's also helpful from our clients after the fact, right? Sometimes there's questions that come up after you've delivered a report. Maybe it's a 20-page report, maybe it's a 100-page report, right? But like as clients have questions, they can now engage with a chatbot in a more conversational way. And it also allows us to build towards the future. I mean, a lot of things that we're doing, whether it's, from new concept development, right? We can now add to this chatbot to grow with the types of products and solutions that we're working with our clients on. So you might start with phase one, and then as that concept moves along, you can continually add to the chatbot so that you can have all the learnings in one place.
No, that's super helpful. And Keen, I know that you were instrumental in the development of some of these tools. So can you share a little bit about the journey and learnings of what worked and what didn't when building these chatbots, what data we use, what data we avoid, and ultimately what the future roadmap looks like for extending the way that we action on these things?
Yeah, I think it's been a learning process, and I think one of the key things that we've found a lot of success in is a collaborative approach, both internally and with our clients. And one of the things that I think folks who may have interacted with more off-the-shelf offerings in the chatbot world, so things like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude, is that there's a lot of flexibility in the types of answers you get based on the prompt you put in. And I think for us, we've started thinking about these chatbots as being really customizable, and each chatbot sort of existing on this spectrum of highly controlled and also flexible. And so part of the development process, that collaborative development process, is figuring out where each individual output that we deliver to a client, where that sits on that spectrum.
Right. And so as we think about the differences between these more external or end user tools like chatbots or whatever they may be versus some of the more research techniques and those tools that build efficiencies, what are some of the trade-offs of using some of those tools for various tasks? And what are some of the benefits of using one versus the other? I guess that's
Yeah,
probably a question for, the whole group, but Keaton, go ahead.
yeah. I mean, I think it really depends on what your use case is, and I think that the quality of the tool and the backend infrastructure that you have in place, right? And by backend infrastructure, I don't mean like a specific model or a particular app, but how have you constructed these things to do what you need them to do? And I think for us, it's also finding the balance between when is a custom solution that we build in-house the correct choice versus an off-the-shelf solution that really provides us with the types of function that we need to do a task. And Allison, I know that was part of the process in trying to find a really strong qualitative solution. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we did test, the chat GPTs of the world, and that's what kind of where we were finding the hallucinations. So in our search for something else, instead of building something internally, we were really looking for something that would not pull from the outside world or hallucinate. So we ended up finding a tool that promised that. We did a lot of internal testing with projects that we have already delivered on. So we know what the insights were, we know what the quotes were, things where we were really grounded in to do our testing, and we were able to find one that does not hallucinate and was the right tool for us.
But Alison, I think you said something really important there, right? Is that it took us a while to figure out what was the right fit. And right, our curiosity didn't stop. We didn't say, oh, this is good enough. It saves us 20% of our time. No, we kept looking for something that really fit the need. And I think there's a lot to be said about the number of tools that are out there today and the marketing that exists around AI and how it's really tricky to sift through all of that noise because there's a lot of noise out there and there's a lot of amazing promises, but it's definitely a cautionary tale about really, digging in, building a evaluation plan, having pilot studies and making sure things work. And so, Allison, when we finally landed on this tool, what was it that said, yes, this is the one that made us stop our search?
Sure, yeah. I think it was the fact that it was so based in the materials that we gave it, right? It wanted to see the discussion guides. It wants to know the proposals and the objectives to really ground it, and it leads you through that, right? It wasn't so I guess the youngest of analysts that are using this tool can do this because it's not a methodology you're making up. It leads you through the process of upload this document, upload the transcripts. It really holds your hand. So if our more junior staff needs to use this tool for reporting, it helps do that. And it's not just, you don't need to have a lot of experience with AI or prompt writing to use the tool.
Well, that's great, right? It really speaks to how the upskilling of junior team members exists with these tools, and the tools aren't replacing them; they're ultimately empowering them to do more than they would have done earlier. Go ahead, Dave. I think you just came up.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think one of the things to keep in mind too is we're not just using a tool just for the sake of using a tool, right? I mean, yeah, AI is the shiny object, right? But like, there's so much out there that like, I do think it's important that like you said, we had this vetting process to make sure that it fit a need, right? And that need, as we're talking about today, specifically qualitative, and again, how can we elevate even our clients' interaction with our research, right? So I think that's just important context that like, yeah, there's a lot out there, right? But it's important to make sure we're using the right tools for the right things.
No, that's a great comment. I think that I want to dive into something a little bit more detailed about the chatbot as well, Dave. We talked a lot about the process and refinement, but can you speak in more detail to some of the actual data that we used and kind of how we learned more about what we needed and what we didn't, and ultimately what got us to a result that we were pleased with?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot, maybe or Keaton can speak more to the technical elements behind everything, but I mean, we wanted to give it as much information as we could. I mean, obviously, we still delivered a report, right? And we didn't want to get in a situation where our clients are interacting with a chat bot and they're getting conflicting data from what they're getting from us in the report, right? That wouldn't be the best case scenario, right? So it was a combination of several things, right? In terms of transcripts, right? Report, discussion guide, system prompts, right? Kind of bringing that all in together, which again, may be normal, right, for these types of tools or people's understanding. But it was important that like we also did a lot of testing to once we brought everything in to make sure that when we did ask it a question, right, it was providing sensical responses and not the hallucinations, that Allison had mentioned earlier. So a lot of that went into it. But the other thing we tried to think through too is like, you can allow it to have example questions, right? And so we tried to think like a client, right? Like, what are some of the questions that a client might ask that isn't, technical in nature that you might normally otherwise put into an AI prompt, right? So we wanted it to think like a client and be able to answer questions appropriately.
Yeah, and
Right.
I
I think.
think,
Oh,
oh,
go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Peter.
Ben.
No,
Oh, I
no,
was,
no.
I was just going to say, I think that that's such a good example of AI of AI development not happening in a vacuum, right? The tool is more than the AI backend. It's a platform to interact and perform work and find insights. And so with that, right, and this comes back to something Allison said about the solution we finally settled on. It's about design, right? And having tools and a design that is easy to use. And I think to Dave's point, right, that the design challenge that we were trying to solve there was the empty page challenge, right? If you're as a client, if you're confronted with a blank slate and a chat window, sometimes that's hard, right? And thinking carefully about ways to get people excited and engaged with the data, I think is part of our development process as well.
Yeah, no, that's great insight there, Keaton. I think I want to drill a little bit more into some of your world and some of the behind the scenes for the technical folks on the call. Can you speak a little bit to some of those considerations and guardrails and user experience and user journey applications that we put a lot of time and effort into when we build these tools that other folks that are building these tools from the ground up should keep in mind?
Yeah. And maybe I'll start with the chatbot example that Dave mentioned, and we can talk about another example later on if there's time. But I think one thing that we discussed a little bit earlier, right, is that these chatbots we're building are a lot more than just a provider specific portal that we dump data into, right? It's a lot more than a ChatGPT or a Perplexity or an Anthropic. They really rely on these custom pipelines and custom instructions, and that's designed to keep them flexible and adapt to our clients' needs. But it's also designed to keep things very, very secure. And security is huge for us. I think security and AI is a big topic that is in the limelight right now. Internally, we have a great team of folks that assess individual options as they come up, and along with the architecture when we're building custom solutions. And we also recognize that security on the AI and LLM front is not a set it and forget it model, right? This landscape is constantly changing and it moves fast, and that means that we need to position ourselves to keep evaluating and assessing things from a security standpoint as the landscape changes. I think side by side to security is accuracy and trust, right? And I think one of the big things that we've really started thinking about and implementing in these tools is that a lot of that accuracy and trust and validation internally is a people-focused process, right? And people are sort of part of the architecture. And our approach on that has really been to adopt a model of collaboration between folks on our side who understand the business questions and the research questions alongside the clients during the development. And I think that that collaborative process helps build that trust in the tools that we're using and developing, and helps folks feel good about the accuracy that they're seeing in the tool along the way.
It's really interesting that you mentioned the people as the process, right? Because I think that swings back to some of what Allison was saying with the investigation of her tools. And so, Allison, can you speak a little bit more to what really we mean by that kind of human in the loop or that human-led AI assisted framework and how that applies to really enhancing your workflows?
Sure, yeah. So obviously we need to have the human element in there as kind of like a check, right? Even though we trust these tools, still having the human insights and the recommendations, right? AI can't do everything. While it can do a great job at pretending to be a person, it is not at the end of the day, right? So the rigor that goes into this research, and often the recommendations are findings, they are human written. You just can't replace that. AI can try, but it's not going to get there.
No, that's completely true. But I will challenge you that there is one place that we have found with some of our own research on research where we actually believe that AI wins, which I can't believe I'm actually going to say this, but when it comes to some of our evaluation of everything that everyone loves to do with open ends and have them sit on a shelf and go unnoticed, especially when you have 5,000, 10,000, etc., how AI can actually do a good job without a human in the loop in that situation. And so, Keaton, I know that we've done a bit of work on that evaluation and understanding and building tools around there. And so can you speak to some of how that one use case actually kind of breaks out of the traditional human in the loop mechanisms that we've been talking about so far today?
Yeah, I think it's a really good example because I would say it does break out of that mold in some ways, but it also reinforces it in another. And I guess the first piece is that we didn't start by building the tool. I think we all had an assumption that AI could definitely code open ends faster than a human, but the question was, can it code them with equal or better accuracy than a human? And so our approach was a research first approach that internally we needed to understand what was happening in human powered coding, what the variation was, and then run some experiments to actually show whether or not our internal solutions were sort of up to snuff, so to speak. And our research shows that they are, in fact. And that doesn't mean that we have an end-to-end automated AI solution for open-end coding internally. We've still adopted a human in the loop approach. So we have a variety of knobs that we can tweak in this internal solution that leverages AI that deals with things like non-determinism in LLMs, which is just a fancy word to say that they don't produce the same output every time. But we really need consistency and reproducible pipelines for things like open encoding, right? You don't want to run it once and get completely different categories than you got the second time. So we worked through the technical aspect on that front, but we recognize that there are particular points in the coding process where humans are really, really important. One of those points is code frame generation, right? Humans, we need humans that understand the business problems to come up with those categories. And we need humans at the end to check and test and validate. So down the road, we have strong confidence that the codes that are being generated make sense in the context of the work and have been validated by a human.
No, that's great. And I think that's certainly one of those examples where the blend, but mostly focusing on the AI there actually works. And it's been really surprising to us to find out how well AI can capture that slice of the pie and be successful. And so I want to pivot the conversation. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dave. I see you're off mute here.
No, it's fine. I just have to chuckle because I'm sure people sitting around the room listening are like, thank God something's available to help with coding, right? I mean, it is, but it is one of those manual processes, right? And I think just extending that use case in particular when it comes to like tracking research where you already have that set structure from wave to wave, right? It saves a ton of time, right? And so it'll be exciting to see how we can continue to extend that, to customize, sort of one-off projects as well.
No, perfect. That's a great ad. And again, like we said, it was definitely a welcome surprise that it worked out as well as it did, especially given a lot of the failures that we've been seeing with AI across other use cases. And so I want to turn the conversation now away from some of the tool development and things that we've been working on, and more around what it looks like to overall adopt AI at your organization. And so, we've been working over the last couple of years to both identify and pivot as to what a tool that's widely available that we can share with the masses looks like, and what is that process to keep all of our team members aware of how to use best practices, guardrails, use cases, etc. And so, ultimately, we've landed on one of those out-of-the-box solutions that's been incredibly helpful for much of the low-hanging fruit. Some of the things that Allison mentioned about upskilling some of our junior staff and even empowering some of our senior staff to take on more or synthesize additional information that otherwise would have been incredibly time consuming. And so, ultimately at this point, we've rolled out an internal tool that's available to a majority of our team members. But this was a gradual process. We started really small with about 10 folks early on, and we bounced around from a couple different tools until we landed on where we wanted to be. And as we were doing this, we continued to onboard small user groups. And so, these kind of tips and tricks I'm going to outline are things that you all can use as you're thinking about scaling AI at your organization to hopefully be more successful in getting adoption. And there was something really critical about that small group onboarding as opposed to, all right, everybody at KS&R, here's your AI tool, go use it. No, it was really take 2 or 3 people aside, show them what it looks like, how to use it, some of the use cases, get all of their security settings in place, and then ultimately have them go ahead and start using and learning on their own, because everybody comes in with a different trust, knowledge, and skill set with AI tools that they have used either in previous roles or during their personal lives. And so aligning everybody up front in those small group settings was incredibly useful. And I think Keaton mentioned it earlier that the AI landscape is consistently evolving. And so, in addition to those small onboarding sessions, we hold monthly training sessions where we go through, we discuss use cases, folks talk about what prompts are working well, where they're applying the tools, what's working, what's not, and ultimately being able to align on guidelines and guardrails and bring folks up to speed on what's new, innovative, and different from how we've been using the tools in the past. And this has helped us establish a community of active users, which really helps facilitate ongoing sharing and growth in the AI space. And we're all learning from each other about new use cases, breaking down some of those silos that might exist across teams, which is super helpful because you may have a team that you don't work day to day with, but they have a great AI use case, and that can really work well for you. And having that channel to facilitate learning and knowledge sharing can be incredibly valuable across an organization, big or small. Yeah, and we also run a pulse survey. Yes, we're a market research firm and we run a pulse survey, so kind of checks out. But ultimately, that's been really helpful in capturing data to reinforce some of those learnings, understand where the gaps are, if folks need additional resources or training in certain spaces, or if this tool isn't doing the trick anymore, we need to go out and find something that can facilitate an understanding of what else is out there. That's how this whole qualitative tool came to be, actually, was that we continued having folks mention about hallucinations, whether it was in pulling quotes from open ends or in transcripts, and the off-the-shelf tools weren't working. So that identified to us a problem. We went out and we solved the problem, and ultimately are a stronger organization because of it. And the last piece is, reinforcing what Keaton said as well, and what others have said, is that we're constantly reviewing and updating our guidelines and guardrails to make sure that any of these newer models or partners or whatever it is that we're applying is in compliant with security and regulations that we uphold ourselves to make sure that all the data that we use and process with these tools is secure and safe and can get us to the insights that we need. So with that broader access, I wanted to open it up to the team. Now that your teams have had more access to these tools, what has it empowered you to do that you couldn't have done before we had this available to all of us? Go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, I'll start. So recently we had a very large usability study that consisted of 60 plus in-depth interviews across 3 or 4 different moderators. And obviously, as you could imagine, the reporting for that is rather hefty. So it allowed all of the moderators as well as analysts using our tool to get up to speed with everything quickly. Not only that, to find relevant verbatims, but it also helped us clip. Another cool part of the tool, I guess I haven't mentioned yet, is it helps us find sound bites or video clips that we can insert directly into the report to kind of bring it to life a lot faster than we could have if we were just editing a basic video like we've done without AI. So really sped up the reporting process as well as helped us feel more confident about our findings, especially for those that were less involved in the moderation or listening into all 60 of those IDIs, because as you could imagine, 60 IDIs, 60 minutes, that's a lot of time to get up to a lot of information to get up to speed on. So really it is the biggest time saver for that.
Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. Dave, Keaton, anything to add?
I mean, just kind of similar to what Allison was saying. I feel like I was on a soapbox for like the first 10 years of my career, to say I wish we had a better way to go through transcripts, right? And it started out as like a keyword association network or whatever, right? And now it's evolved into this, right? And I just think just by nature of the work, right, it is a labor intensive methodology and approach, right, with 60-minute interviews. I mean, I don't want to do the 60 times 60 in my head, Allison, but like that's just a lot of information, right? And so it's just allowed us to be better communicators with our clients and storytellers because we're spending less time on the minutia of like, aggregating transcripts into an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, right? And spending more time with the actual insights.
Yeah, I think my example is maybe a little different and may also not be a surprise to Ben. But I spend a lot of time writing code. We do a lot of data analysis on the quant side in DS&I, and also building these tools from code. And one of the things that I think often gets forgotten when we're building these processes is documentation. It's an easy thing to sort of not focus on once the thing's out the door and gone. And I'm a strong believer, and I think our team's a really strong believer in documentation as an important breadcrumb trail, so that the next time we do these things, it's easier to do and other team members can pick it up. And the tool that we've been using internally has been a lifesaver for me to quickly generate really high quality documentation that folks at all skill levels across our team can consume and understand our processes.
Yeah, documentation is definitely one of those places that is a pain point of anybody who writes code, and AI certainly makes that job a lot easier. And I guess that's one place that we don't often think about as qualitative, but if you stretch your brain a little bit, coding is qualitative, right? It's a language, and that's one of those fantastic use cases where AI tools have made our analytics teams much more efficient because of things like co-pilots or coding agents that can work directly in our repositories and help us build out these solutions side by side with us, as opposed to the old-fashioned ways of going into Stack Overflow and looking up that information. And so I think I'll get out of the weeds here for a second and remind everyone to please submit any questions you have to the Q&A in the bottom. We're going to turn to that in just a moment. But first, we did want to look ahead to, what's next in the AI world. And so, there's a lot of momentum around things like agentic AI, synthetic data, autonomous agents, and what does this all mean for our industry? And I think the good news is that, we're all at the forefront of all of this change and innovation. And so we can make that path and roadmap for ourselves as we actively investigate these things. And so in future sessions, we plan to tackle some of these, more future thinking AI applications and how we're thinking about them. And we'd love to hear from, some of you all that are listening, the way that you're either applying agentic AI or think that it might disrupt your industry. Your thoughts on synthetic data and ultimately how AI automation can really help or harm the way that business works today. And so with that, I'll go ahead and open it up to the Q&A. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we have here. So here's a great question for the group. So how do we handle conversations with clients that are adverse to using AI? Does anyone have a specific example? I could talk through mine, but I'd rather have somebody else go first if you have one top of mind. All right. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I guess you were anticipating me coming off mute.
I was. I
Honestly, I think it's just an open and honest communication with your client in terms of what you're going to use it for, what it can and cannot do, right? And so I think as long as we're upfront with our clients and sort of build that rapport and that trust, and also ensure that if we're going to do anything with our clients, that it's going to be secure, right? Then I think that's just how we approach it, right? I mean, you might not be able to convince them otherwise, or at least not yet, right? But I think as long as, we come to the table with these solid examples and these types of conversations in terms of how we're using it and how it's been used elsewhere, because a lot of times, if I put my healthcare hat on, right, people want to see it done somewhere else before they decide to use it, right? And so as long as we can come with those case studies and have an open and honest dialogue, then it should be a productive conversation with your clients.
Yeah, I think it's one of the core processes that we lead by is that research first approach, right? So ultimately, we are not going and pitching an idea that we haven't already validated and fully stand behind with our research first. And we often will bring clients, whether skeptics or not, along with us on that research journey. So let's say that we are innovating in a new AI solution. Chatbot is a good example where we've taken clients side by side with us and walked them through the development process, shown them the early tool that works, it's not perfect, and then how we iterate to get it to a point where ultimately everyone's comfortable with delivering it to their stakeholders. So I think that human element and collaboration is critical in getting folks alongside you and having that trust in these solutions moving forward. All right, I've got another one. What are your takes on privacy and security when it comes to agentic AI? So that's a loaded question. I can go ahead and start. Keaton, you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think that the bottom line is that there's more to think about and maybe worry about, and also build around when it comes to agentic flows, because we're talking about AI agents having material effects in the real world, right? So that's pretty different from the current pipelines that I think most of us consume AI generated material from now. So again, things like your Chat GPT. So I think that and there's great literature. There's lots of really smart people out there thinking about this right now. I read some great stuff yesterday about the lethal trifecta of AI LLM security. Great article. Check it out if you're interested. But I think this is an example of the landscape evolving quickly. And again, I think our strategy on that front has been to really devote resources to continue to understand the space and think very, very carefully about the tools we build and the infrastructure behind them.
I think that's a great summary, Keaton, and I think that there's also a lot to be said about what access that we're giving to these autonomous systems, right? And do we give them the full keys to the kingdom? Do we limit that window and keep them focused on a very specific role to minimize any potential collateral damage? Or how do we think about structuring where they live and what they're doing so that we can have a controlled space where they are accomplishing those tasks? So let's see. What is your take on AI when it comes to what is this? Customer segmentation.
So I can speak to the tool that we use for reporting. The tool we use does have segmentation capabilities. So when you are uploading the transcripts or recordings, it profiles each panelist specifically or each participant specifically, and then you can go in and add your own segments, and you can query those segments specifically. So if you've got a younger demographic that you're looking to hear from or a specific region, you can assign those things before going in and querying or even building, the transcript chunking or the grids to be able to look at participants by segment. That it's all included in that tool, which is another reason we ended up going with that one as well.
What about broader, outside of just the tool, right? Do we think that AI is a replacement for things like traditional statistical methods of segmentation? All right, I'll give my 2 cents. So, um, so I guess for me, it feels like it's really dependent on what the use case is and also what the data is that we have available. So Allison's point about having transcripts be segmented, that's a very hard problem to solve with traditional statistical techniques. But if we have tabular data from a quant survey, that's a very hard problem for AI to solve today. And the reason I say that is not because I don't think AI can solve that problem in the future, but I think it's that today we do see even more struggles with AI trying to provide analytics directly on tabular data versus give us code and tools to then go and further analyze it. And so from my perspective, I think it's all about the data that you have and how you're trying to answer the question. So let's see. We've got kind of what is the next frontier of AI in market research? I think this is a great question for us to end on, given this is the next chapter of AI in market research. So, Dave, why don't you kick us off with your 2 cents here? We'll go around the room, see what everybody has to say.
Geez, I have no idea. I mean, I think it's continuing to think through what are some of the processes that could be addressed through AI, right? I mean, we're talking about one use case now, right? Qualitative research, right? I mean, Ben, you kind of just touched on something else that's been on my mind, which is leveraging tabular data, right? So again, in my mind, I approach it as, how can we get to insights quicker and more efficiently, right? While still, feeling confident in the data that we have. I feel like maybe that was like a leading question towards maybe how we get to the data, which I don't want to touch on yet. And, maybe Ben, you have a point of view on that, but at least from my perspective, that's how I see it. But also how we can continue helping our clients answer questions around AI. I mean, we're market researchers, right? Our clients need to ask these same questions, right? And so if we're doing it ourselves, then we're very equipped to kind of help our clients address it for their own businesses.
Allison, what about you?
So I'm gonna take a different approach to this question and say where I don't think we see AI headed for KS&R. So we don't see this as a solution for replacing moderators. I think there's a lot of chatter, right? Can AI take over? And we just don't think that it's there yet. We think, it misses the human layer. Qualitative moderation is about building rapport, reading body language, catching hesitation, knowing when to probe deeper. And we just don't think agentic AI is there yet. We know that it can follow a script, but we don't think it can improvise with empathy or adapt to group dynamics in real time. So we are not comfortable yet there. So interested to hear what Keaton has to say in terms of his thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'm going to piggyback on something Ben said earlier around sort of this blending of quant and qual. I think historically there's been a divide, and I think that it may be that that chasm's getting a little shorter with some of the new tools at our disposal. And I think we're also in a place where the models are probably not going to get astoundingly better than they are now, and we're sort of in an infrastructure phase, right? Where, as Ben said, giving models the tools to work on that tabular data feels like, at least for me, sort of the next frontier. Expanding their capabilities, but still maintaining that core thing that LLMs are really good at, which is language.
Great. Well, thanks for all the insights and the conversation. This is really a great session. Hopefully, all of our listeners got something out of this as well. If you're looking to get in touch with any of the panelists, if you have additional questions, we're going to be sending a follow-up email with information about that, and we are going to continue our series on AI and market research. So stay tuned for the next session. Thanks for joining, and have a great rest of your day.